Hello, I'm Harry. Welcome to No Code Life. I'm just introducing this particular Stackdown, our first one, because it was made during lockdown. So there are some technical difficulties. I'm away from my setup, so I'm doing it on a very old laptop with a bit of a dodgy microphone. But I want to introduce you to our first episode on Yestr, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello, Jeff. Nice to meet you. What is Yestr? Tell me about it and how you. I guess I'm interested, especially in how you came up with the idea initially.
So I have one older sister, and a lot of the times I would just sit there and think, and man, I should really be connecting with her more often. And I'm thinking, I am just being a bad brother, and I wanted a way for us to connect. And all the time I would think about old memories that we had together, and I would remember something and I would say, gee, I wonder if she remembers that. And actually, I thought there must be an app for that. So I went searching and I just couldn't find what I was looking for. And it kind of planted the seed in my head of, hey, maybe you should go build this.
I think I'm guilty of worrying about that as well in terms of being a bad brother. Actually, I've been using Yestr for the last week or so with my sister, and it's been great. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it. It's the first time. I mean, especially at the moment as well, with everyone feeling so isolated. It's been really good just to get in touch with my sister. I mean, I'm speaking to her semi-regularly, but about our shared memories. It's been brilliant. So if it's okay in a moment, I was wondering if we could. If you could show me around Yestr. So if it's possible, we could do screen share.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you could just show me, initially, I suppose it would be great to just see the front end of things and just get that up. But then, of course, it would be interesting to look behind the scenes. And I've got a few questions for you about that as well.
Okay.
Here we are. Rank 1, of course. That's great.
Yeah, well, I wasn't always ranked 1 with my sister. We just moved into that rank the other day. Before it was my my wife and brother-in-law, but they missed a day, and then we took the lead.
That's brilliant. That's how it works, I suppose. If you the longest streak, really.
Yeah, and the idea behind that was, the interaction alone, I think, is pretty fun in itself, but I thought I could add a couple extra fun components to really just introduce the competitive aspect. And I think people, when they see numbers, they can at least kind of compare themselves to others and see how they're doing. So at first I considered doing what was called a sibling score, which was going to factor a bunch of things together and kind of give them their score on kind of how good of a sibling they were. But I kind of landed on a streak, and so far it's been working out pretty well.
Yes, great.
So, and my goal is to really have this go on as long as it can go. It may go for years, and that would be great. And if we have siblings that make it through a couple years together, then I think my goal of bringing siblings closer together hopefully will have been met.
I mean, what kind of experience did you have before with, do you have any coding experience? Are you exclusively a no coder? And what program is this built on? What platform or tool is this built on?
I started out right out of college. I kind of started out doing some web stuff, and this is 20 years ago, so kind of dating myself here. But
Sure.
I didn't really go to school for computer science or anything like that. I was always interested in computers and working on them, and I was just amazed on things you could do with them. So I was very curious, and I had a degree in sports management. I really liked sports growing up. I thought if I could marry marketing with sports, it would create a perfect dream job. So I had worked for a minor league baseball team And
Cool.
I remember that I went down there to work for the summer, and they didn't have a website yet. This is 1998, and they didn't have really email for the office or any of that. And I remember the GM came into my office one day and said, "Hey, what do you think about getting us one of those websites?" And I knew nothing about websites at the time. But I was very curious, and I thought this sounds like a really fun project. So I set out at that point, and long story short, I kind of taught myself basic HTML and built them a very basic, 5-page website. And that kind of began my path. And I worked for actually a couple different NBA basketball teams. I worked for the Detroit Pistons. And there is where I kind of headed up their website team at the time, and started to become more of what I would call a digital team, because it expanded beyond just websites. And then I worked for the Cleveland Cavaliers as well. I wouldn't call myself a hardcore coder or an expert really in anything. I know enough to be dangerous. I can a lot of times look at other code and kind of tell what it's doing. But when you do work at a sports team, you are forced to wear many hats. So, I knew enough code to be dangerous. I also dabbled in Photoshop and graphics and recording video and editing video. So I knew a little bit about everything.
Sure.
And, when I finally got to the point where I was ready to build Yestr, I actually, explored, finding a technical co-founder. I explored paying a third party to build this. And I just didn't like the answers that I was getting. Finding a technical co-founder is hard. And,
Sure.
Some of these third parties I was getting quotes from range from anywhere from $15,000 up to like $80,000 just to build my MVP. And I just decided that, very similar to when I was back at the minor league baseball team, I'm just going to figure out a way to do this myself and build it. But when I was first searching for platforms to build it on, I did come across Bubble, and I played around on it for maybe 30 minutes. And I decided at that point that Bubble was not the answer. And I left and I moved on. Okay. But then like 6 months later, I came back to Bubble, and it was all because there was a blog post about somebody that built a Twitter clone on Bubble.
Right.
And I read that, and it opened my eyes, and I said, wait a minute, if someone could build, something like Twitter that has all that functionality and complexity on Bubble, there's got to be a way that I could use Bubble. So I gave Bubble a second look, really took the time to go through some of the tutorials. And just like they say, Bubble does take a little while to pick up. And it's because it has so much power to it that you can't expect it to be, you jump onto the site and within 5 minutes you're building. You really have to spend the time educating yourself.
Take some work.
Yes, absolutely. So that's kind of the long-winded story of everything you just asked. But I couldn't be happier with Bubble. I really at one point wanted to go a native app route, but the more I thought about it for my MVP, I thought, okay, if I can get this to work on Bubble, which is a web app, then I know for a fact if I eventually go down the path of doing a native app one day, that things could potentially even get better. So it's a good test for me, just to go out there and say, okay, if this can work with a web app and people don't have native notifications and they're still coming back each day, that's a great thing.
Definitely. I'm aware that I haven't let you or given you the time to take us through the actual the app. So if you could please just kind of take us through the kind of general homepage and the functionality, and just explain to us how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you get to the site here and register, and I'm just going to fill it in.
Sure.
Okay, so once you log in, it takes you to the next step, which is filling out your profile. It really doesn't let you go do anything else until you've completed this step. So after I completed my profile, it gives me two choices. I can either generate an invite code, or I can say my sibling already sent me an invite code. So if I do generate an invite code, it does generate one right there. So it's JL81200. And at that point, an email gets kicked off to you as well with that code. And you could actually forward that email on to your sibling if you want. And you're really waiting for your sibling at that point to go register their own account and then input this code to begin.
Great.
So I'm going to jump over to the live site now. Once you do have your sibling accept that code, they will see a home page that looks something like this. And all of their stats there will be at 0. And they'll have that button that says view today's Yestr. And once they click that, they will see the question. And if you haven't answered it yet, there will be a box here where you actually could submit it. Now, I've submitted my answer already this morning, and I'm waiting on my sister to answer. I think it would be helpful to look at maybe a past.
Yes, yeah, that would be great.
I want to find one here that is interesting.
I have to ask, but maybe I'll ask later when we kind of see more of the back end, but how you do some of the things. So I think, for example, the blurring feature, just kind of nice details, fine details of the site, which I think are brilliant.
Yeah, the blurring is actually a plugin. I came up with that when I was actually building it, and I thought, oh, it'd be really cool if you could show an answer there, but it's blurred to give that sibling that motivation. Oh, I gotta answer to see this. So
yes, yeah,
there was I'm pretty sure I just went to the Bubble support forum, where it's a great resource. Tons of people are on there, and I searched, and somebody mentioned the plugin, and it was like $4.
great.
So I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. So I went ahead and did it. So this is what it looks like when both siblings have answered. Now you see both answers, as well as ability for you to comment, as well as there is a like feature where there's, I think, 5 different emojis you can choose from as well.
Yeah. Those comments, if you comment on, say, your sibling's answer, is it kind of do they get a notification? Is it like a back and forth?
Yes. So I did set up notifications up here. You can see this bell. If you have an active notification, there'll be a red dot on it.
Great.
When you click on it, it'll show you all the notifications, your last 5. And if you want to view all, you can click over to a notifications page. The liking, commenting, and notifications are all things I added after I launched.
Oh, right.
So I got it out there, and it was out there for maybe about a week. And I had the idea that it'd probably be even better, because once these answers come in, people want to keep the conversation going. They'll see an answer and they'll be like, oh, a lot of times they'll be like, I don't remember that, or oh wait, I do remember that, and they'll add a detail. So I thought commenting was super important. I thought the liking was super important. And then obviously getting notified about those things as well was really important. So that's when I added the notifications. And one thing you can't see here, but maybe you've experienced it as you've been on the site, but I did enable browser notifications as well. That is
Yes.
through a third party called OneSignal. They have a plugin for Bubble.
Right.
But because this isn't a native app, I thought it would be important to be able to offer that. And a lot of the users have enabled those, which I think is helpful. I don't kick off an email to every user every time there's a comment or a like, because I thought that could be email overload.
Yeah, sure.
But I do kick off an email to each user in the morning to give them what their topic is for the day. And I also I kick off an email every time their sibling actually submits the answer for the day, because I think those are the two big things they need to know.
Kieran actually said, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he was doing, he's managing a couple of projects in Bubble as well, but he was trying to do push notifications for quite a while, he said, that he gave up. So I'll be sure to tell him about OneSignal, and hopefully he'll be able to put it into one of his sites.
Yeah, I actually reached out to him, and because he sent me a note and said, "Hey, I'm super impressed you got those working." And I said, "Absolutely. If you need any help, just let me know." And I think that's one of the great things about the no code community is everyone's willing to lend a helping hand to each other. We're kind of all in this together, and we just want to see each other succeed. So it's been the support that I've seen out there on Twitter has been really awesome.
It's great. And talking of that, I was wondering if would it be possible for you to show us a bit of the back end and some workflows, just a couple of examples maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Pop over here into Bubble. Somewhat embarrassed to show what I've done because there's probably like 6 better ways to do what I've done.
Oh, believe me, I totally understand coming from that point. I mean, I'm working on something on Webflow at the moment, and I'm in my early stages of it. And honestly, I mean, even the basic things, like I think the styling is all over the place. I've created different classes when I didn't need to. So I think that's one of the things about when you kind of lift the veil to look under the hood behind some of these projects. It does feel quite personal sometimes. So, but I appreciate just having a look.
Sure. So this is the homepage, and I will note that a couple weeks into launch, I realized that Bubble offers this cool option where you can actually build a whole other page and specify that being the mobile version of the page. So
right,
you can, I mean, it gives you a lot of options to make a responsive site. And that's how I started out. But I couldn't get it quite how I wanted it to be in terms of a mobile look. And I felt like the mobile look was really, really important because most people are going to be doing this from their phones. So I redid a page just on mobile for both the homepage and the Yestr page. And once I did that, I felt like so much better about everything. I'll dive into some workflows in a second too. But we have one thing we didn't talk about were the badges. Yes. So if we go back to the homepage, I have a kind of a badge system that every night there's some processes that run in some workflows that kick off once a day, and they check to see if you've hit a certain threshold, and if you have, they kind of award you one of these badges.
Great. And I love the badges feature.
So that's where these are. These are this is what's called a repeating group in Bubble, which I think repeating groups are super powerful. They allow you to take data from the database and you can apply certain conditions or filters on them and show a result of X amount of those on your page. So that's what I'm doing with the badges. I'm saying in this current friendship matchup group, there is a database field called badges. So it assigns the badges. So it's saying, okay, give me this matchup's badges sorted by number. and then display them across the page.
Okay, and so they're stored in, so the images are stored in the database. How
Yes.
how exactly does it connect up then, the process there? When they've achieved, say, a certain streak with their sibling, how
Yep.
does
So
it then attach that value to that user?
that's what's in my backend workflows. And by the way, backend workflows, when I discovered these maybe a week or two into this, I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe that this was something that Bubble offered. Their paid plans, they had what are called scheduled workflows. And I thought you only get like one of those in the paid plan, I think.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's going to be a big limitation for me because I think I want to do a lot of scheduled workflows. I'm sorry, recurring workflows is what they give you. I didn't know you could schedule a workflow on your own, and that doesn't count as a recurring workflow. So I was super happy, and I have it set up that each night there is I have this what's called the Yestr creation workflow. So every night at midnight, it creates the new Yestr for that next day. So I have it here where it creates, and this is giving you some of the details. So the current user's friendship, which is the sibling connection, and it applies some of it sets some of the data fields of that memory, or I'm going to use the word memory and Yestr interchangeably.
Sure.
And it sets an expiration date for that, which is going to be, if it's 12 a.m. that day, it's setting it for, 11:59 p.m. that night. And then it sets a number for that Yestr as well. And it finds out what number you're at, and then it adds 1 to it. And after that point, then it goes and grabs from a separate database I've made of topics. So I have a database of topics that just I edit in the database manually, where I upload the topic name, the topic description, the topic number, and finally the image for that topic. Okay. So if you're on memory number 25, then you get number 26. It's going to look for topic 26 in the database, and it's going to grab that topic's title and append it to that memory. And then I have a couple other things that happen in here, including scheduling other workflows. So, and this is where we're going to get to the badge processing. So these emails are sending an email notification to each user. It's scheduling it to go out, I believe it's 7 a.m. And there's one for each user, for each sibling. And then it sets up to schedule the badge processor workflow, which is actually a separate backend workflow over here. So you can use a backend workflow to schedule another backend workflow, which is cool. And then it can just kind of continue that loop and keep going and going, because you can see at the very end of this workflow is to schedule basically another one of the same workflow the next night. So it'll just keep going and going and going.
I see. Okay, yeah.
Now the badge processor, I have 10 different badges right now that I've created that you could potentially earn. So it goes through every step to determine if you should get that badge. That, okay, this action will only happen when all of these things down here are true. So typically I have to say, okay, make sure that the memory count is 1, and that this, I also add a rule in there to make sure that that friendship doesn't already have that badge as kind of a safeguard. But I go through that for every badge, and a lot of times the badges, depending on what they are, sometimes they're based on a streak, sometimes they're based on, I just added some ones based on comments. So I kind of have to set that up based on just checking to see if those things are true for that specific user.
How did you source the images for those things? I mean, I'm just interested in terms of the actual, designs of the badges, but also you've got some great, illustrations for each that are relevant to each question every day. And I also wondered, where you source those kind of things. Do you design them yourself? Do you get them from I know there's some good databases out there that I use personally for different illustrations. What about yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you noticed that, because I really thought that adding that bit of splash to each question each day really kind of livens it up. And I just use like it's called Free Pick, and I got a premium account there where they have a lot of vector-based graphics and artwork that you can download. Right. And pretty much any question that I'm thinking about, I'll go in there and I'll just kind of search some keywords, and a lot of times something that matches pretty well will pop up. So I've been lucky enough to find a service that has a pretty wide selection of what I need.
Yeah, that's great. I've found a similar site. I think that's what I've been using. But I'm always interested because sometimes I stumble across a project or an app that someone's created, and they've got quite unique images, and I'm like, where did you get those from? Have you got like a graphic designer on board that's creating these things?
One day, obviously, if Yestr was to continue moving forward and grow, I would love to come up with our own consistent look that's more on brand and all of that, and that would be great. But I think in the time being, I'm really happy with what I've been able to get from Free Pick.
I mean, this is first of all, when did you launch? When did Yestr launch?
Well, that's kind of a complicated question, because I'm going to go back to my first iteration. When I first had the idea for Yestr, I was reading the Lean Startup, and there was something in there that I read that really made the light bulb go on, and it was something to the effect of, you don't need to go build your product. Like there was a company in there that was able to like make it look like their product was doing all these magical things, but in the reality, it was them in the background doing everything manually, without any automation. So I created this little basic mobile WordPress site, and my goal is to get my wife and her best friend to play. And this is back when my original idea for Yestr was not contained to just siblings. It was anybody that had a connection, period. So I set it up, and I had a Google Voice number, and I set it up that every time they submitted an answer, it went through like a gravity form on WordPress. I would get notified. I would have to go in there and manually change the site. Then I would send a manual text to either my wife or her best friend, letting them know it was their turn to go. Right. And they didn't know. I mean, they didn't know the difference. But for me, I just wanted to prove whether or not they would do it. Would they keep this going? Was it fun? Yeah. And they did, and it was enough for me to keep going. And that's when I kind of wanted to take it to the next level and actually build the real thing. So I originally launched the first iteration of Bubble in January of 2018. It was really quite a different product back then. It was, again, meant for anybody, whether it was you and your spouse, you and a sibling, you and a parent, you and a coworker. And the idea was a game where were a number of topics, but the topics applied to the type of relationship you had with that person. And then once you picked that topic, it was a turn-based game where, example would be, name a kid that lived in your neighborhood where you grew up. And it would be my turn to list one. Then it would be over to my sister, and it would be her turn to list one, and back and forth until somebody finally couldn't go any further, and then the interaction or game would be over. So that's what I built the first time.
Right.
Got some people using it, but I learned it was kind of a hard lesson because, just like everybody, you fall in love with your product, right? And when it doesn't work out, you get a little sad.
Yeah, of course.
And and I, what I learned was some people would do it, but I think a lot of times they would lose interest, or I think it was a little bit too much of a time commitment. These interactions, if you were doing it back and forth, could consume, your whole day.
Yeah, sure.
And I think because of that, and because it was user initiated, whereas I thought, okay, what if this was something that was pushed to the user on a regular basis, so you don't have to worry about them initiating? And what if I made it a much shorter interaction where it's just one answer, it's limited to 280 characters, so it's no more than what time it would take to create a tweet.
Yeah.
And that should take you less than 2 minutes a day. And I thought also, let me get refocused and just do siblings right now, because that's how I came up with this idea. I know that siblings have such a great bond, probably a closer relationship than just about any other relationship you can think of, because they share more memories probably than anybody. And I thought, okay, if I can get to work with siblings, then maybe down the road there's ways to expand that. But I think I made the mistake that many people make in their MVP, which is I went a little too wide.
Yes.
And not as focused as I needed to be. So it took me a couple years to come to that conclusion. And Yestr just kept coming back into my head, and I knew, when that idea just won't leave you alone, that's when I think that there's something there. And luckily, being home and quarantined the last couple months, and unfortunately some of the other work I was doing kind of dried up a bit, and all of a sudden I found myself with not a lot to do. But I've always been thinking, hey, when I have some time, I really want to focus on bringing Yestr back and doing it right. And it probably took me about 3-4 weeks to get it ready to launch, and that's where we are now.
But that's great. I mean, that's pretty much it, Jeff. Thank you so much for talking us through your brilliant product, and I'll continue to use it. Thanks so much, and for kind of lifting up the hood and seeing some of the work behind as well, because I know that's not something that every maker necessarily wants to show. But it's really interesting and helpful for us to see that. So
absolutely, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our time. Anytime you have any additional follow-up questions, definitely reach out. I'm happy to help, and I'm interested to watch your podcast.
Lovely talking to you, meeting you, and hearing about the product. And I will speak to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Harry.
Cheers. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. That was the lovely Jeff at Yestr, and that is yestrapp.com. I will put it down there. Thank you. That was our first official vlogcast on Yestr. There will be many more to come. I hope you enjoyed it. I did have some technical difficulties at my end, so
there may be slightly less of my lovely mug on your screen as you may have in the future. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any more questions, of course, for Jeff, about Yestr, about us at nocodelife, or if you would like to get involved and you want to share your product, if you're a maker and you want to lift the hood, as I say, or lift the veil and we can see behind, that would be brilliant. Get in touch with me at harry@nocodelife.com. And yes, thank you again for bearing with this and for the Zoom call and my wonderfully high definition webcam. Thank you so much, and see you next time.